Hello, Ryan here, aka Mac, and welcome. The Persistent Universe Monthly Report was released, and with it comes a ton of very juicy updates. It is a long one, so grab yourself a drink and some snacks, and let's delve in. As always, a huge thank you to all of my patrons and channel members. Thank you so much for the support. And if you do appreciate my videos, please do consider subscribing and helping the channel to grow. So let's kick off with the character art team. They continued their work on frontier clothing for Pyro, and they also polished a large batch of armor and clothing material variants for the Ninetales gang, which I believe we will be seeing in the upcoming dynamic event at Orison for Fleet Week, Invictus Week, or maybe shortly after. So thankfully it looks like these actual Ninetale members will look like the concept images that we saw a while ago on Inside Star Citizen. Also for concept art, a salvage themed backpack is still being worked on, and progress was made for a collection of fashionable outfits for Stanton. Now for the ship art team, they finalised paints for the RSI Scorpius, which completes their work on the ship. There's probably still work to be done from other teams, but that completes the ship artwork. The Banu Merchantman exterior has progressed through Greybox, with the team acting on what was learnt during the research and development phase. Very nice to hear this, making progress much quicker than I expected on the BMM. 4 unannounced vehicles were also developed. One is in the final art phase, with work focusing on the complex technical areas. I suspect, personally speaking, this is probably the Drake Mule, but it could be anything really. 2 others are currently in the white box stage, while the other one was completed from an art perspective. No idea what these other ones could be. I wonder if this Anvil capital ship is one. I don't know. In the US, the team focused on the Drake Corsair, creating space in the fuselage for the docking ring, turrets, landing gear, and elevator. They then moved on to exterior detailing towards the tail. And for the interior, they created the crew quarter set that will populate all the 4 rooms inside. The foyer was finalized, while the co-pilot's cockpit, engineering room, turret interior, and airlock are nearing completion. Very excited to see the Corsair come along. It is such a great little multi-crew run-around kind of vessel. Really looking forward to this ship. It is going to be epic. Now on to the weapon art team. They dedicated time to improving the stow, stock, helper setup, moving from a generic offset to a more handcrafted setup per weapon. This, they say, should result in weapons fitting more closely to the player's body and overall less clipping. Very happy to hear this. Weapons do kind of hang a little odd in many cases, so some refinement will certainly not go unnoticed. A similar pass was started on scopes as well, which will give the weapon feature team greater control and ability to tweak the aim down sight position. So I'm assuming this is all part of this ongoing weapon audit that has been going on for a few patches now, just to bring all the FPS weapons kind of to a gold standard of sorts, improving functionality, animations, their stats, balancing them, and everything in between. Now on the art side, the team continued their work on Banu ship weapons, filling out the manufacturer with several new product lines. Animation completed their first pass on many of the new FPS gadgets and iterated on the setup with the art team. And finally, they also continued with the fire extinguisher. Now for the community team, they kicked off planning for a small summit in Austin in early May. This is to iron out the details for events throughout the remainder of the year and 2023, including Bar Citizen events, with more details on these coming soon. Really hope I'll be able to make it to a live CitizenCon this year, if of course they are holding a live CitizenCon, but with a baby due in the next any minute now, I suppose, it may be cutting it quite close as to whether I feel I will be ready to attend. So we will see, but let us hope at least that physical events can start up again. Now for the engine team, the physics team worked on splitting the batched grid cleanup into 2 parts, being cleanup and defragmentations. This is to allow for finer control of time slicing. Unnecessary computations were removed from the physical world time setup, and the time stepping code of living entities was improved. Also, auto-conversion of legacy constraints to constraint attachments was implemented. Not really sure what any of that means, I do apologise. Now for the Gen 12 renderer transition, this continued with the planet terrain patch rendering being enabled. Render proxies received various improvements and shadow generation was also enabled. Support for viewport scaling to render pass was added, which they say is convenient for Atlas, Atlas being the functionality that splits the game up into multiple manageable regions, and dynamic resolution scaling. And also various debug UIs were implemented to assist development. For example, a UI to easily control or trigger cube map generation in-game for testing purposes. Gen 12 ports of the planet terrain height map and shadow rendering systems were finalized and merged upstream. One of the finishing touches was to rework cascade culling for planet terrain height map rendering so it can run during the submission of draw packets from batch workers. And finally, Gen 12 ports of the atmosphere and cloud rendering will commence soon. On the core engine side, a potential deadlock in the exception handler was fixed. Cleanup of code using include what you see continued. GPU frame time is now included in analytical events to provide better data on how long actual frame times are on the GPU. And finally, Linux game server instances now also use separate user folders. A lot of words. Not 100% certain what they all mean, but of course any of the Gen 12 progress is music to our ears as we are getting closer and closer to Gen 12 being fully implemented and no legacy renderer. So next up we have the character and weapon features team. They progressed through the inventory issues based on feedback from 3.17's PTU phase. This involved adjusting the underlying inventory logic and flow to work with the new persistence tech, being the entity graph. This, they say, was a significant undertaking involving close collaboration with back-end teams. They then moved back onto the fire extinguisher, with the team saying it's an interesting challenge as it has quite a different profile compared to other weaponry. It has a bulky cylinder that holds the liquid or gas, which it can spray continuously. This gadget is going to be important in combating interior fires on spaceships to stop them draining the life-critical oxygen supply. We are working closely with visual effects to connect the logic with the fire hazard system, as well as bring the extinguisher to life visually. So some great work going on there to really make the fire system as real as possible, it sounds. It's going to be quite the day when we have to tackle fires on board a ship and manage all the systems appropriately, venting oxygen or turning off life support to stop the oxygen being used up. It's going to take some thinking, and I am very much looking forward to it. Now on to gameplay features. They say significant progress was made on ship salvage, with an improved HUD being created for the Drake Vulture's salvage mode, which we will hear about a little later on. They also added additional aiming functionality tailored to the unique setup of ship arms, and also the Reclaimer's salvaging turrets were properly set up and can now scrape hulls. Salvaging does sound like it's going to be a lot of fun, even just for its first iteration, which from what I've seen, seems like it'll be quite a therapeutic mechanic, but it's also very exciting to hear that the Reclaimer is beginning to get its system set up. Although this isn't the giant claw, it is still part of bringing the ship to life. Now, the big question is, will the Reclaimer have these turrets set up to scrape hulls in whenever salvage comes along, hopefully 3.18 still? Or will they hold off until they start tackling that ship more thoroughly? I'm personally thinking the first option, where the Reclaimer will be able to strip hulls just like the Vulture can, but there's a lot more to it than just scraping a hull. And finally, for gameplay features, work on the UIs for life support and engineering gameplay progressed, while improvements were made to the tools used to set up the resource network, which will make working on it easier. So many big systems are all now coming together, and if you think you're going to be bored during a long quantum travel jump, do think again. There will be plenty to be getting on with, checking systems, monitoring and adjusting things on the fly. There is a lot of cool stuff making very fast progress. Now for the vehicle features team, they implemented the turret on the Scorpius, further tested the gameplay updates to Master Modes and Quantum Travel Boost. Still don't know exactly what Quantum Travel Boost is. They also plan support for the refueling feature beyond its initial release. Time was also spent investigating desync issues, and although many improvements have been made, the depth of the issue across many areas of the game has made it difficult to narrow down the cause, with fixes exposing further problems. And I suppose, thankfully, these issues are getting exposed now, so they are aware of them, and the more that do get exposed, the better the chance of them getting on and resolving them are. So finally, for vehicle features, work was done on quality of life improvements and tuning across the game, including for racing ships in atmosphere, loadout changes, and health of industrial ships. I have heard the Misk Razor is actually now a pleasure to fly, but I have yet to give it a go myself. Now next up we have the graphics and visual effects programming teams. For Gen 12, the team focused on setting up the proper viewport size to render passes in the G buffer and depth pre-pass stages to support the render-to-texture pipeline. Work also continued on the cleanup of resource arrays and analytic shadow scattering queries, and visual effects auto tests continued as well, with the flow graph nodes being updated for more consistent results. Not really sure what any of that means. And finally, for salvaging, the team added UV2 density parameters to the mesh setup editor. This, they say, calculates the required resolution of PBM, not sure if that's maybe physically based materials, as well as debugging crashes in RC when generating a ship engine attachment CGA PBM. So many acronyms, no real explanations as to what they all mean, so if anyone does know, please do drop that in the comments. Now for the lighting team, they continue to focus on Invictus launch week. A full lighting pass was completed on various locations and points of interest before moving on to polishing, optimizing and bug fixing. They also worked on the new planetside Reclaimer Derelict. This involved a lighting pass on the interior of the ship and blending the exterior into the planetary surroundings. In fact, we did get to see an internal shot of the Reclaimer Derelict in the latest newsletter, and it is looking pretty spooky. Now for the EU locations team, their main push was finalising environments for Invictus launch week. Elsewhere, work is almost complete on several small locations the sandbox team is planning to release in an upcoming patch. The areas themselves, they say, are finished and are currently awaiting a distribution pass across Stanton. I do wonder what these could be. Extremely happy to hear more points of interest are coming to Stanton, and hopefully it is this year. Pre-production continues on new space-based points of interest, with the team exploring one final theme before moving into White Box. Hopefully this will help to expand on maybe the exploration mechanic, providing content straight away when the system gets worked on. New cave prototypes are progressing well, with improvements to materials and the general read across the board. And this image of these new caves, or one of the new caves, looks very nice. Looking forward to much more variety with caves going forwards. Elsewhere, the second round of content for the initial release of the new colonialism outposts is nearing final. These outposts will soon start to be distributed across the Pyro system in readiness for its debut. Oh boy, it is going to be insane flying through to Pyro. I think my mind will probably explode. Now for the Montreal locations team, they are approaching the last development phases of both the Reclaimer Derelict Settlement and Reclaimer Space-based points of interest. For the settlement, the art team is currently polishing the carcass of the Reclaimer and the Habs, while the design team is implementing the location's missions. They are working very quickly on this. The available points of interest planetside will be many by the sounds of things. They are really pushing for tons of new locations. The space-based points of interest progressed through Greybox, with the last month's work including the design team implementing and tweaking missions. The art team also began an art pass to narratively support the mission themes. It's quite exciting to know that not only are they creating new locations with missions planetside, with various points of interest like wrecks, settlements, outposts and so on, but also in space as well, so plenty to get explored. Finally, for the Montreal locations team, they progressed with the ongoing Lorville cityscape revamp, which involved defining recipes for buildings and blocking out the city, with the team saying, work is progressing well and we're confident that the new scale of the city will support a lot of interesting future opportunities. I'm actually really excited to see the updated Lorville city. We knew when they first built these locations, these main landing zones, that they were just the initial version of them, and they always intend to expand on them going forwards, but I cannot wait to see these cities expand to be more like cities, with more areas and locations and interiors, really giving that sense of scale, not to mention all the various missions that these cities can contain. And I suspect that once Lorville has had its revamp, they will then move on to all the other cities as well, but this update is certainly not going to be the last. So let's shift gears and take a look at what the AI teams have been working on. For AI content, they spent time working on the eat and drink and leisure AI activities. They now have a complete gameplay loop where the AI can now locate a sustenance dispenser like a vending machine, chow line or a shop, obtain food and drink, and then find somewhere to consume it, like a seat, or maybe a railing or an idle spot. Now, once finished, they will then go and dispose of the container in a recycling bin before using a leisure usable to pass the time, such as reading, writing, or watching content on their mobiGlas. The next step, they say, is to add the AI tech team's new dynamic conversation tech so that the characters can systemically converse with others while utilizing usables. The team also began work on a new commuter activity. This controls all aspects of a character's behavior when using public transport, including choosing a destination, waiting for transit to arrive, entering it, passing time while in transit, and then eventually exiting, with the team saying, "We had an animator and designer work together to create a narrated previs video explaining how they envision this working. The next step," they say, is to itemize the tasks and begin prototyping. "We hope this will add lifelike transfer and traffic to our transport hubs." So, sounds like they are using this navigation links where NPCs will be able to use elevators or trains, allowing them to move around landing zones and space stations, which will help in regards to getting these things like NPC taxi missions working, hiring NPCs, having them as crew, plus having NPCs capable of going basically anywhere the player can, which is vital to the overall game and affects basically everything. The economy, bounty hunting, missions, NPC crew, as I say. So great progress here with the fundamental AI behaviors, not to mention how they can actually now take care of themselves by eating and drinking and moving around as they need to. Now, for the AI tech team, they finalized their work for 3.17, which involved investigating and fixing several AI-related bugs and making various optimizations. And alongside work mentioned in the Squadron 42 monthly report, the team completed the engineering phase for dynamic conversation functionality, adding ways to allow the designers to mark up which conversation topics are allowed in different locations. So, for example, if in Lawville, NPCs can talk about maybe working at the factory, which is only relevant to that city. The system, they say, will also allow the designers to set up topics on a specific character and then automatically select a specific dynamic conversation skeleton and in turn randomizing topics related to that conversation flow. Now, onto AI vehicle features. This team fixed bugs and provided release support for Alpha 3.17 and Invictus launch week. Not long now. They also began work on the Flight AI debug tool and its 2 test runner levels. The V_spawn AI command was also updated to include options for overriding the crew manifest and skill set, and the flow graph node for spawning vehicles was updated too. And lastly, they are currently allowing enabling tests to be managed via editor windows. Quite interesting hearing that they now have the ability to set the AI's skill set and crew manifest, so choosing the NPC and their abilities when they spawn AI in. Quite a useful ability, I'd say. Now, for the animation team, they began filling out leisure areas with AI, including characters using arcade machines, additional idle animations, and actions at tables, like using the mobiGlas. Facial animations were done for outlaws, vendors, bartenders, and a new mission giver. Oh, a new mission giver. Don't know who that was. Maybe Eddie Parr. We haven't seen him yet, but we'll see. For weapons and gadgets, blockout animations were created for handheld gadgets and explosives, and work began on a new SMG. Explosives. Handheld explosives, finally. It will be great fun having different explosive types like C4, trip mines, those sort of things. So much scope for expanding on these gadgets, and I can't wait to mess with them all. Finally, previous work was also done for how a weighed down player should feel, and patrons drinking at bars and tables. It's going to be quite interesting seeing, or maybe even feeling, what it's like as a player to be weighed down. I suppose it's if you are carrying too much, then your character may struggle to move, like what we see in many MMOs, but likely being unable to vault ledges, climb, use ladders, or maybe moving much slower than normal, kind of throwing more thinking gameplay into the mix. Now, for the narrative team, they continued support for ongoing work for future dynamic event missions and discussed how best to incorporate a new upcoming gameplay module into one particular mission's flow. I do wonder what this mission could be. The team also met with the Montreal team to discuss the details of several new missions. Sounds like alongside this new dynamic mission system, they are really ramping up the mission options and just trying to expand on what jobs players have available, all the while expanding on the many various career mechanics as well. Star Citizen does feel like it's about to just explode with content at the moment. Finally, for the narrative team, they also began planning on an upcoming capture session to record content in support of new missions and to progress the ongoing NPC work with the AI team. So for QA, they focused on event testing, feature testing, integration checklists, and regular feature checklist testing. Now, the embedded AI team, so a QA member who has been kind of assigned to assist the AI teams with QA, they worked through fixes and feature updates dealing with the behavior of FPS AI towards players and other factions. They also continued sanity and smoke schemes to ensure NPCs haven't degraded and synced with the mission team to broaden their testing. Very happy to hear this. Having QA specifically looking at the missions more thoroughly is certainly needed, as many of the missions we have can often break. And when you have been playing Star Citizen for a while, you kind of just know which missions to avoid and which not to. But for a new player, it can be very off-putting and frustrating trying a mission and not knowing if it's broken, if it's you, if it's the game. So having a dedicated QA specifically look for these issues should see a lot more consistency and quality of life improvements to the current missions and then new missions going forwards. Now for the engine team embedded QA, support continued with minimum spec PC stress testing as well as page heap testing to catch memory leaks. So this minimum spec PC stress testing is being done to see if they are able to find any potential optimizations and performance gains, sort of on the lower scale of PCs. Finally, for the QA members embedded with the tools team, they continued to receive support on DataForge, StarWords, Excel Core, Copy Build, and the Sandbox Editor. Now, for the Montreal tools team, who we recently saw in Inside Star Citizen, they began putting the final touches to Mighty Bridge version 0.5, which will support the integration of Houdini into the editor. This will allow everyone on that team to use Houdini-powered tools directly in the editor, as we did here on Inside Star Citizen. Now, the tech artists created tools to support the ongoing derelict work, alongside continuing development of the procedural locations tool. And I wish we got to see more of that, the procedural locations tool, during Inside Star Citizen. I do feel like we will soon be spoilt for choice on locations, points of interest all to explore. Things are certainly scaling up. Now for the tech animation team, they continued creating new face rigs for their internally created scan data. They also invested substantial time into the tools chain and process to ensure upcoming heads are quicker and cleaner to produce. The team also supported the feature and animations teams by providing the animation systems to accommodate their increased requirements. For example, enabling the system to support up to 50 layers of authored and inverse kinematic animation on a single character. So this I learned thanks to my techie friend and all of you who actually explained it in the comments on my Star Citizen monthly report video. Thank you for that. Is the blending of an animation between the kind of starting point and the ending point. So basically the movement in between an AI's arm moving from start to finish. So it's referring to the level of fidelity from the arm's kind of starting point to its finishing point and the amount of layers between that. And if done well, this should give a great natural looking result in movement, plus allowing the NPCs to be able to interact with objects from random locations without everything needing to be predefined. So pretty exciting work that will hopefully look incredible when implemented, and it's exciting that they are bringing this in. Now next up we have the Turbulent team. For them, they worked on the new login flow refactor, and with the majority of the working code complete, the team is now integrating, testing all the respective services together, including rental, entitlement, and login. Also, significant progress was made on the new entity graph service. Now for the live tools team, they released their latest version of Hex, featuring an all-new user interface. They're also working on developing and adding new features to improve the versatility of the network operations center, and with design at an advanced stage, they're working to implement new modules dedicated to monitoring and troubleshooting logging issues. Very happy to hear that. Finally, for Turbulent, the web team spent the month getting ready for Invictus launch week. This, they say, involved refactoring the Alexandria tool with new skins, themes, and content. Have we been told about the Alexandria tool before? That doesn't ring a bell for me. So if anyone knows what it is, please do drop that in the comments below. Now for the UI team, they worked on the new star map and radar UI. The devs implemented basic controls, enabling them to look around a solar system and view the planets, orbits, and vehicles within it. Hopefully we will see more on this very soon. They also began adding an info panel that players can use to see details about selected objects, with the team saying, although it's rough around the edges, the groundwork is there for us to add functionality and start improving the visuals. I think they will be taking the opportunity here to really make something special for the star map, adding tons of functionality and tying it into the signature system with the scanners and the radars. This new star map is already sounding like a big game changer in so many ways, and I'm hoping that we'll get to see it in game as soon as possible, but I am just happy for them to spend time shaping it into everything it needs to be beforehand. Now, the visor and lens conversion, which involves converting the existing player HUD elements to building blocks, is well underway, with many widgets including weapon information and mission objectives ported to the new system. And they also continued to update features in support of persistent streaming. I do hope that this visor conversion gives us more of a feeling like we're wearing a helmet. It's going to be nice seeing this roll out, giving us more reason maybe to choose certain helmets over others, depending on what we're doing in the verse. That'll be nice. The UI tech team also continued developing additional building block features, one of which will replace the canvas slice tech used to develop 3D UIs, with the new card system receiving major usability and performance improvements, which is currently being tested in the vehicle HUD for hull scraping. I am sure that we will see more of this as we get closer to 3.18's release at the end of June, as Jared will most definitely have a salvaging special Inside Star Citizen episode, taking a deeper look at both hand and ship salvaging. Finally, the UI team worked on a new AR marker system, and they improved various widgets to help the UI designers work more efficiently. So the final team is the visual effects team, who continued their work on the salvaging effect, shifting focus to the vehicle hull stripping variant, with the team saying this proved to be more challenging than the FPS variant, as depth perception is trickier to gauge from the ship's cockpit, with the player's position relative to the salvage nozzle. So due to this, they're currently experimenting with visual aids to give players a more user-friendly experience. It is going to be incredible to see that and how it's coming along. The team also continued to work on various vehicles, including the RSI Scorpius, Drake Vulture, and one of the unannounced vehicles mentioned by the ship team. Very sneaky. Cleanup was done on several particle libraries, which included converting some older libraries from CPU to GPU particles, and due to the large size of the particle database, this work is ongoing. Investigations begun into visual effects requirements for the various derelict locations being worked on in Montreal, and finally the visual effects team continued the necessary Houdini update, which involved ensuring all existing tools worked correctly with Houdini 19, which I think is the latest version, plus the team also continued experimenting with better ways to fracture geometry to help create more realistic looking damage. And if we see any improvements on the damage system, that will be pretty amazing, as that system is already looking quite impressive. Anyway, that was the Persistent Universe Monthly Report. That was full to bursting with information and updates about all of the work going on. So much is getting worked on, and many of these features are actually getting pretty close to completion. As I say, I do really feel like this content is ready to burst out, and I can't help but think that once this replication layer is implemented, hopefully for 3.18 all being well, then these floodgates that Chris was talking about will actually open up. But with that said, if you do enjoy my videos, please do consider subscribing and helping us get to 50,000 subscribers. Also, if you are new to the verse or a veteran and you're looking for something to do in the PU, do check out my Zero to Hero series linked below. Hopefully it can help a few of you. Come and follow me over at twitch.tv/supermacbrother. You are all more than welcome. We're also doing a Zero to Hero over there and just enjoying 3.17. If you could hit the thumbs up, I would really appreciate it. It does the channel a big favor. And if you would like to be notified when my videos go live, just tick that notification bell. Again, thank you to my patrons and channel members. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.